Good morning. I'm Sarah P. Wallace. I work for the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, but I'm here to talk a little bit about the Scopes project with the Fab Foundation. So as Sherry talked about earlier, this Scopes project stands for Scaling a Community of Practice in Education through STEM with Digital Fabrication, and it's the Fab Foundation's K-12 initiative. So all of these amazing projects that are happening in Fab Labs around the world and in Fab Academy and Fab Academy are amazing, but we need to think about what can we do with 10-year-old kids so that when they turn 20 and go to college, or turn 25 and decide to take Fab Academy, that they're ready and they're excited and they want to do more great things. So this project started in 2016, 2017 with help from the Chevron and the GE Foundation, and the Scopes team visited 2 high schools. The first one was in Cleveland, Ohio, MC Squared High School, where I work, and then another one in Tennessee, STEM Chattanooga. The Scopes team spent a lot of time with these 2 schools seeing what everyday STEM education really looks like. What does it look like to be a regular teacher in a classroom with the same 15-year-old kids who maybe don't really want to be there? And how can we do real STEM education with these students? After about a year of following these teachers around and seeing what works and what doesn't, as well as doing some professional development, we started working on this really amazing website. In the past year, the website has grown to having over 730 members, and I think we got a couple of more this week. And this is a community of K-12 educators who are really excited about doing formal STEM education with younger students. Now, all of the community members aren't formal teachers. Some of them work in Fab Labs, some of them work in after-school community-based programs, or maybe libraries, or science museums, or something like that. But everyone here is working with younger-aged kids. The website is a platform, so for teachers and community members to talk to each other and to connect, but also to share content. Right now, we have over 160 lessons on the website that, as Sherry mentioned, are free. You can go online, you can peruse them, you can see which ones you might like, which ones might be appropriate for your students, and you can quickly download them and access and then take them to your own classroom. Right now, all of the lessons are in English, but we're hoping as the community in China grows, the amount of content that we have in Chinese also grows too. The website also contains a 33-page playbook, which has kind of like a reflection about what the Scopes team learned in the past 2 years of following around a lot of different STEM teachers. So again, what works, what doesn't, what things might be better for older kids versus younger kids. It also includes the Fab I Can statements, which are these great they're focused around 6 centers and thinking about how students progress around design and modeling and electronics and programming so that we can kind of standardize what our students are learning in that age 5 to age 18 range when they're really starting to get their fingers wet with digital fabrication. Right now we have, like I said, 730 members. We're in over 440 cities, and in China, there's over 30 cities that are represented. So hopefully we can grow these numbers more and get more Chinese content. The numbers are growing each and every month. We've gotten over 700 in less than a year. So hopefully as this project continues, we'll continue to grow as the Fab Lab network grows as well. Now, there's a lot of content on there from a range of topics. So even though we say this is a STEM class or maybe it's a STEAM class, there are lessons that have to do with humanities and with language and with socio-emotional learning. So we are looking for more lessons like that. So you can see that there's a lot of things, like our first ones down there are science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and art, and that makes sense. But we're trying to show that digital fabrication doesn't just mean STEM or doesn't just mean STEAM, that no matter what the content that you're teaching, you can use digital fabrication. So the work that I do in Cleveland as part of the Scopes team has 3 main parts. We have a mobile Fab Lab in Cleveland that I take around to different schools and do fab activities. We also have a STEAM teacher fellowship program that I'm going to talk a little bit about in just a minute. And then we also have a stationary lab where I do teacher workshops, because if we can engage more teachers, then we can engage more students eventually. So I have this big kind of idea booklet of all of these different projects that I do with kids. So I wish that I could have my students grow fake meat, because that would be amazing. But most of the time I deal with 8-year-olds who, sometimes I don't want to give scissors to. So when we think about what do projects actually look like for K-12, what is the right thing that we should be doing with these young students? So I'm just going to share a couple of the projects that I do with my young kids and kind of how I got there. So first thing, I believe that all kids can deal with FAB and can be successful with FAB, no matter their socioeconomic background, no matter what kind of technological experience they've had before. So figuring out how to access those kids is the tricky bit, but everybody can be successful here. I also think that any teacher can be successful with digital fabrication, and that sometimes is harder than dealing with the kids themselves. I believe that all of the FAB projects that I do should be rooted in standards. So each of the ones I'm going to talk about are rooted in American science or math standards. And while there are some projects that are a little bit more extracurricular and might seem a little fun, they actually, if you delve deep enough, are really, really connected to standards. So here's my favorite project. This is the Alebrijes project, which I stole from Fab Lat Kids. Alebrijes are these really cool little Mexican sculptures that are based from an artist named Pedro Lianares. And the students get to learn about the history of these sculptures. They get to design their own little creature. We laser cut the creatures, and then they get to paint them in the traditional Oaxacan way. So if you just glance at these pictures, you might just see like a little kid with a cute little sculpture, but actually there's so many learning opportunities that are happening around this one project. So for every project that I do with my students and every project that I have teachers plan, I have them make a web like this and think about, even if we look at this project and it looks like an art project, what actually can we kind of pull out of it? So this one project, if we start kind of at the bottom, the movie Coco, it's a Disney movie that came out a couple of years ago. Alebrijes are featured in that film. So students have that kind of current event connection with this project. There's, of course, the iterative design process. When the kids design their own alebrije, we have them share their designs with each other and kind of get some feedback and decide, well, maybe this alebrije should have bigger wings or littler wings, or you need a tail and things along those lines. We're obviously doing digital fabrication. We can laser cut these little guys, or they can also be 3D printed. This can be a science lesson. I've done this with 3rd graders, so 8-year-olds who the teacher was studying animal classification, and we had this really interesting debate about if an animal has the body of a T-Rex, but the legs of a mammal and the wings of a bird, what is it? Where would it live? What would it eat? How big would it be? Which are all part of the 3rd grade science standards for the next generation science standards. We also turned this into a scale factor lesson for math, thinking again, if an animal had the body of a T-Rex, how big would the wings need to be if they were butterfly wings to actually allow that T-Rex to fly? We have students write their own adventure story, similar to the story that Miguel and Diego go on in Coco, so they're doing a writing activity for this project. We already talked about the social studies part of it. They can study the Mexican culture of alebrijes, or in 6th grade, students learn about Greek mythology, so you could also kind of think about these as maybe like the Sphinx or the Minotaur. And then finally, it's clearly a cute little art project. So this is a very nice example of a STEAM project that if I'm working with an art teacher, the art teacher might focus on the artist or the Greek sculpture part of this project. But if I'm working with a science teacher, they might focus more on the animal classifications part. So even though it's just one project, it can be adapted for 5 or 6 different teachers. Here's another one of my really favorite projects where we take kids, we make silhouettes. We can use this with a laser cutter or a paper cutter. So everybody loves a laser cutter, but they're very, very expensive. In Cleveland, we use Silhouette Cameo machines, which only cost around $200 US. So it's a really cheap option to get digital fabrication into the classroom. We have kids do this in two ways. They use the positive part of their silhouette to kind of create what you would think of as a silhouette project. But then with the negative space, we do this what's in my head socio-emotional learning activity. So we're having kids really like focus on what is inside of your head. What are the feelings that you might not be talking about, but you feel comfortable putting down on this piece of paper because all of your peers are as well. So a lot of our lessons have a socio-emotional learning aspect. There's a really big push for that in the States right now. It's also part of that Fab I Can learning cyclone that Sherry spoke about earlier. So this little silhouette project also has a bunch of different applications. Can't figure out any math applications for this project, but if you have an idea, let me know. Designing a logo is a really popular project that I think we've all seen done in a million Fab Labs across the world, but the question is, how can we take this design a logo project and make it applicable for young kids who are studying different topics? So if I'm a science teacher, I want to talk about the psychology of logos and the psychology of marketing. And does McDonald's use red and yellow because red and yellow actually make us hungry? Or does red and yellow make us hungry because we've been looking at McDonald's for our entire lives? So thinking about this like psychological component of advertising. A math teacher made their students create logos that only included polygons, and the students had to be able to identify the polygons, which is part of the Common Core math standards for fourth graders. And of course, this is a great art project for students to be able to think about symmetry and designing and thinking about different kinds of jobs. What kind of a profession would someone have that they would actually be a logo designer? Adinkra symbols, this is part of our Black Panther collection on the Scopes website. These symbols were featured in the movie Black Panther in 2016. They're a West African pictorial language that's similar to hieroglyphics, but instead of them being carved into stone, these symbols were woven into clothing. So for this activity, students have to do a worksheet where they determine their own personal values. They pick 3 core values. It's a very strong socio-emotional learning activity. Then they find the real-life Adinkra symbols, so the West African symbols that already exist that match those core values before they design their own symbol, and we can either 3D print those symbols, or if we have them laser engraved onto a leather journal, then we can have the kids do a writing activity about that, about those 3 core values, why they chose them, why they're important to them. There's also a beautiful book called The Talking Cloth that's appropriate for middle grades that you can have students read before doing this activity. So even though the end product might be making a journal or might be making a small little token or a keychain, there's so many rich learning experiences that go into this digital fabrication lesson. Designing a city is, I think, a popular project that we have kids do all the time. I think kids often are drawing pictures of buildings, but turning it into a digital fabrication project where it starts off where students are actually having a conversation. What belongs in a city? What buildings do we need? Kids never think about putting a grocery store, but they'll always have a toy store on the list. I did this activity with a group of all female students who were 7 to 8 years old, and not only did we need a toy store, but we also needed a hair salon and a nail salon. But when we did this with mixed gender kids, there was no beauty stores of any kind. Not only do we have to think about where or what we need in the city, but we also have to think, where do the things go in this city? So then it becomes a city planning lesson. So we started off as kind of like an architect role, and now we're thinking, where should the hospital go? Should it be by the apartment complex? Should it be by the school? Should it be downtown? So this is one small activity that has all of these different applications. I've also done this with kids who are as young as 7 as well as old as 17 and gotten, actually, I think better results with the little kids. But the, one activity can have all of these different applications and be good for big kids and little kids. The layers of the earth, like if you look at this project, it's the layers of the earth, the mantle, the crust, the core. This is a really straightforward science activity, but there's actually so many more things that we can talk about. So this is actually a really intense math lesson where the kids have to create the model of the earth that is exactly mathematically accurate using scale factor, which nobody loves fractions, and I can say that because I was a math teacher. But we also have the students think about color families when they paint their models and determining if they want to use a monochromatic or an analogous color family to make sure that their model is visually pleasing. Oh wait, then there's this part. This is great. The flat earth versus spherical earth, we turned this into a debate where half of the class had to be flat earthers and half of the class had to be scientific spherical earther arguers, and they had this like very, very intense, angry little kid debate about what the earth actually is shaped like. So these are all examples of lessons that I go around and do with, this is my trailer, I drive it around with my big red truck. And the first year that I was doing this, I went and I worked with about one school per week, and I did about 1,000 kids a year doing rigorous projects. But throughout that time, I trained 0 teachers, because I was going to these schools, and the teachers were there, but the teachers were kind of thinking of me as like a field trip, that I showed up and they could kind of check out for a little bit, and then I would do the majority of the teaching. And that was a bummer, because I was there for a week, and then I left, and the kids didn't continue to do any of that digital fabrication, and the teachers didn't take anything away from it. So now I have it's actually a STEAM teacher fellowship. I didn't get the A balloon somehow, where I work with a small group of teachers each year, and all of these teachers are ladies in the first year, so we had a now we have a couple of gentlemen as well. But I work with these focused teachers each year to teach them how they can use digital fabrication in their classrooms using those lessons that I've already have created, but they're also creating lessons of their own. So in the second year, I have my fellowship teachers, and I'm working mostly with them, and they're going back and working with all of their students. So I trained 10 teachers, and they did about 750 students worth of rigorous projects in the first year. And now I'm training even more teachers. So now I'm doing weekly workshops that teachers are coming in. So each year I'm working with about, hopefully, 50 teachers who are then going to be doing about 3,000 students who are engaged in rigorous projects. So now with last year and this year, I'm hopefully gonna have about 60 teachers doing 4,000 projects a year. Next year, I'll have even more teachers as the project continues to grow. Plus, I have teachers from the first year who want to teach workshops. So I'm not the only one who's disseminating the knowledge anymore. The teachers have become the teachers of the teachers. That's confusing. I can only imagine how you're translating that. Thank you. So hopefully, thank you. Hopefully within the next 5 years, we're gonna have like at least 300 to 400 teachers in our district who are trained with digital fabrication, who have a inexpensive 3D printer or vinyl cutter in their classroom, that they're gonna be able to continue doing this work, even though I'm not going to the class with the mobile Fab Lab anymore. So we're making little baby mini Fab Labs. So how these workshops work is it's a 6-step process. The first step, a teacher comes and takes workshop A with me, which I have 3 tracks around 3D printing, vinyl cutting, or simple electronics. They take the intro workshop, and then they have the homework. They need to go home and do a simple project. So I give them a big list. Here's a bunch of options. Pick one, complete it. So I want them to show me that they're actually engaging in this work, even when I'm not in front of them. We take a second workshop, then they have to complete a content-focused project. So if they're a science teacher, maybe they want to do that Layers of the Earth project. If they're an art teacher, maybe we're going to make some Adinkra symbols. Workshop C, they're going to make a project plan on how they're going to engage their own students with this work. Then they do a hardware training workshop where they come into the lab and we actually teach them how to set up a 3D printer and what do they do if it breaks. Then this green part is the only time that has to do with kids. They take that 3D printer home, they play with it so that they know how to use it, then they take it to their classroom and actually get to make some stuff with their students. They bring it back to me a month later, and then if they want to continue, they can submit another project plan. So I have about 50 3D printers and 50 desktop vinyl cutters that I'm constantly renting out to the teachers of the district. This is my East Professional Center STEM lab. This is a lab that's just for teachers. Even though it's within the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, kids don't come here. This is a place for teachers to experiment and for teachers how to learn to use this equipment with their students. It's open twice a week from 3 to 6 p.m. These workshops are totally voluntary, so the teachers aren't getting paid for them. They're not getting professional development hours for them. They're doing a little extra work, and they get the 3D printer or the vinyl cutter to kind of make up for it. So the call to action is if you are a teacher, please join the Scopes website. Go online, look at our lessons. If you love one, translate it and put it back up so other members of your community can access it. or just take as many as you can. There's a link here also to a, nope, there's not a link, but on the website there's also those Fab I Can statements that I spoke about, and then also a link to my website that has all of the projects that I talked about today. Thank you.